With soul, there's like chord structures that felt ethereal, like the.
Yeah.
And you hear those all throughout the film.
How's it going, man?
Man, I'm hanging. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's good to meet you. It's good to talk to you.
Yes, man. We got a lot going on. What you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling grateful. I'm feeling excited about making a piece of work and sitting on it for a long time. And then there's a time when it gets out there into the world and it's connecting with people. And
Man, you can say that again. The creative process is such a journey. You ever hear those folks that say trust the process? There's some wisdom in that. It's a mystery. You have a vision at the beginning, and then you trudge through all of the logistics involved with it, all of the writer's block that's involved with it.
I hear that. I feel like it's like, yeah, there's the part of the process where you're like, you get that first spark and you're in it and you're connecting with the director and you're writing. And then, like you said, there's all the logistical part of it. Like coming from outside of the film world, it's an adjustment to like, I've started learning there's this sort of sandwich element to it where the beginning of it is more social and more like what we're used to. And then the middle of it is revisions and logistics and sometimes it can be more isolating. And then at the end, you're recording a band or orchestra or whatever, and then it comes out. It's like the more sort of familiar social, like humans connecting part of it. But this year, that part of it, or the latter end of it, has sort of looked completely different. So
right.
It's been all virtual. It's been all this, you know? So it's tricky to navigate it because it feels like, well, you're getting the same thing but in a different form. And how do you let it feed your soul in the same way, you know?
The connectivity with the audience is the thing that feeds our soul. You know,
exactly.
The when you release it, the response and the feedback loop of that. Totally get what you're saying. Just the aspect of it being so social, just figuring out 2 years before, you know, it was finished. We were having conversations, and when it was done, we were all isolated on Zoom.
I know, it's crazy.
It's a whole nother world. I mean, I don't know how things would have turned out in terms of the resonance with the public, but I sure would have liked to feel it. Even doing TV 5 nights a week, and you know,
sure, yeah,
years having the audience there and at home, you get both. You experience the audience at home, and you meet people around the world when we go on tour, and they feel like they know you, but then the audience that's coming in the house is different every night.
Yeah. You gotta feed off that and react to that. Yeah.
You're balancing both at once. But with Joe, it was interesting because I knew that there were like moments like that. I'm talking and playing, but to catch it in the narrative, for it to make sense in the narrative of the movie, still feel spontaneous.
Yeah.
That was it was such a balance between working with Pete, the director, the way an actor would. He would say, how would Joe say this? Or how would Joe play this? Or there'd be moments in the script where my words ended up in the script because that was the only thing that could make the moment feel
organic. Yeah. I was going to ask you that exact thing. Like, cause there's moments when you're talking and playing at the same time, and it feels like how did you, it would have to have come from you. Because there's no way to really like build that in a sort of calculated, functional way. It has to come from like a naturalistic feeling, like, because music is storytelling. So you're playing and talking, it felt very singular. So what I was wondering how Jamie's voice with your playing, how that was so seamlessly intertwined. It makes sense that you must have just been like talking and building that character, you know?
Yes, it was amazing to collaborate with Pete and also Jamie on making Joe who he was. They were like, the physical side of it was one aspect, but then what ended up happening is Pete would ask me to emulate what Joe would say. And I would give the tapes to Jamie, who he can imitate anything.
Yeah. Famously. Yeah.
Literally imitate anything.
I know I've seen him I've seen him do John Legend, and I've seen him do, yeah. It's amazing.
It's like the character of Joe was going through all of these different filters. You know, they would film me with cameras and they would capture his physical presence. But then sometimes they would record my voice and record me telling stories or ask me about my experience in the jazz scene when I was a teenager. And then that would go to Jamie, or that would go to the writers who were doing the script. And it was really amazing for me to see it all come together in the end.
Yeah.
Because it was Trenton, Atticus, and I working, but then there was this character who I was also a part of building.
Yeah.
To see it all come
to all click. Yeah, that must have been powerful. And I know that feeling. I feel like I had it with this film too, that I scored, where I'd seen the dailies every day. I'd read the script.
Right.
I'd written the music before they started shooting. I'd done all this. I knew what was going to happen in the story, but nothing can really prepare you for that experience of when it all clicks. It's that expression, the sum is greater than I always mess up this expression. I think I'll live my whole life and never get it right. The sum is greater than, the parts, or whatever it is. But it's that thing that makes the hair on your arm stand up. There's something that happens when it all comes together, that you can't really account for, even if you were privy to each stage in the process,
Well, man, that's what I really enjoy about your work. It feels like everything is coming together sequentially, and then the end result is inevitable, but it's not forced.
Mm-hmm.
Like Last Black Man in San Francisco, I really love that.
Oh, thanks, man.
And it's funny. I mean, maybe this is not the forum for this, but I saw an early cut of that film with no music.
Oh, wow.
And then to see your music in the film, it really brought it to life.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much, man. That's cool that you had that perspective and that I got to see it.
To see, that was that's one of the things that actually hit me to your work, which was cool because you rarely get to see a film unless you're working on it.
Yeah.
Without the music. So
yeah.
No, I feel I was trying to create something inevitable with soul, because there were moments we never had a script. Trent Reznor, Atticus, and I worked a lot together, a lot separately. Never on either side did we have a script.
Yeah.
So there were moments where the music had to be a character, and it had to feel inevitable.
Yeah.
Like this is just what would happen, almost as if you're watching Broadway musical and the person starts singing. And
spontaneous. Yeah, it's just there's complete fluidity between music and storytelling. It had to be just come from one source, from the signal to the other person's soul, essentially.
Exactly. And not feel as if there were all of these different things at play. Two worlds within the narrative. this realm and the earth, it just had to all feel as one.
It did, yeah. And I was going to ask you about that. Like, how did that work? Because there's so many scenes where it's almost like the spiritual world and and the real world are seamlessly integrated, and the piece of music is sort of synthesized and transfused and like flipped on its head. There's one scene in particular when, towards the end of the film, when Joe's running through the train station, and there's a sort of piece of yours, this jazz piece that sort of then turns into what Trent and Atticus did, and it did, but it's so seamless. Like, what came first, and that was a case by case? Was it scene by scene? How did that unfold?
a lot of listening sessions to different cues. For instance, if it was a cue where it was done separate, where all three of us weren't working together, we would listen. And sometimes that will require us going back and changing each cue respectively.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to give credit to Ren Kleiss, he did a lot of the sound design and sound effects in the film. And this film in particular, not only does the music have a special role as a character, but man, the sound design is so crucial.
Yeah, it's
so crucial.
Yeah, because it makes it tangible. It makes something that's imaginative and cosmic feel real and feel like you're right there in it. You know, it's like glue. It brings you in. I was always amazed by that with sound, like coming from outside of the film world. Like the first time I went up to Skywalker and watched them mix a film, everything you see visually, they have to build out of nothing sonically. And it can become so visceral. Like even like the sound of, like in Minari, there was sound of like the cicadas in the first scene where and it's like, oh, now I feel like I'm in the South. I feel like I'm in the summer. I feel like I'm in this place.
I wanted to ask, as far as the arrangements and instrumentation, is that something that you had to adjust your approach from being a musician who plays live to now, for instance, with soul, there's like chord structures that felt ethereal, like the.
Yeah.
And you hear those all throughout the film. There's instrumentation that matches. It's still jazz, but it's not what you would play if you were playing at the Vanguard.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still authentic.
Yeah, it's the source is still there and it's still connected.
I
feel like I had that experience with where you're if you're arranging music for a band, for a rock band, for a jazz band,
right,
or you're arranging for an orchestra, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same. You're telling a story. You're just using different tools. You know, you're painting a picture using different colors. You know.
Yeah.
And I feel like finding which colors match which film is always like, it's always a mystery. You can only find it through experimentation and exploration and trying stuff out. And then later on, you figure out how to talk about it.
Pete, Doctor, and I would talk a lot throughout the process of the film being constructed. And that scene, one of the scenes where he gets into the zone, the audition scene, second one you mentioned, was the first scene to actually be animated with music for the film.
Oh, wow.
Kind of set the tone of what we wanted the music to be in the film. And we just had a conversation about it several times, just of what should happen in the narrative there, but there was no picture, there was no script. It was just the idea of what this part of the story should mean and what it should display and what it should foretell for his character arc.
Sure, yeah. What does it sound like to be in the zone? What does that feel like?
Yeah, what does it sound like? Was it and even what does it look like? Like how would the band, in writing the composition, how would the band drift away once they see this?
Yeah, they disappear into and then you're in your own space.
How would that
spiritual realm? Yeah,
right. And
that's
how
so
would
cool.
they react in real time? So it's almost like the composition had to have a little bit of method acting in it.
Sure, yeah.
Composition. It's like, how do I write something to a moment that will be enacted through a character?
Yeah.
You know,
that's crazy. Yeah, but you're shaping the character. You're like co-writer of the film in a sense, because you're shaping. If it's a film about a musician, you know, that's an expression of his soul. That's an expression of himself. That's his music is him. They're, you know, arguably not interchangeable. They're, you know, I mean, that's kind of what the film is about. Is that you're not defined by. I mean, such a great message in the film that like it's that what tripped me out about the movie was it was a cool another angle on this thing that like made me question like made me stop, remind you to stop and smell the roses, for lack of a better, less cliche thing to say. but it reminds you to stop and like actually be present and feel the air on your skin and feel and hear the sounds around you, and not, what tripped me out about it was like, are we lost souls with our careers, with our music, with our are we, if we're not careful, can we become the stockbroker in the film that's a lost soul, or, like, what makes us different from that,
It's
and I think
that obsession
part of it. Yeah. Because it's a religion. It's obsession. It's a drug to all of us. It's all those things. So like, how do you push back from that? And how do you like not become, not lose yourself in a dark way, And I think that's what I didn't see this. I didn't see that coming when I watched the movie. It hit me in a way that I hadn't really seen that exact thing explored in that way. Cause usually the message is follow your dreams, all that, like believe in yourself, lose yourself in your work. And this film was that, but it wasn't really at the end. It was something else too that was more interesting to me, than the thing that you always see over and over in Hollywood.
What was your relationship with Lee when did y'all have those kind of philosophical conversations?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because there's such a sense of place. Like you're talking about the South, you're talking about the 80s. It's just, how did you get there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it was different because this film, the score was all non-diegetic. It was all like, it wasn't like, it didn't have to stylistically be like the characters in the film weren't hearing this music, It was sort of, our conversations were more spiritually about like, does the music spiritually connect to the story? Is the music emotionally connected to the story? Not like, does it sound like the South? Does it sound like the 80s? Does it sound like Korean music? Does it sound like American music?
Right.
This film is like, it's a deeply American film, but it's Korean American characters and it takes place in the 80s. So the score had to be he didn't want the score to be Korean sounding. He didn't want it to be Americana sounding with like twangy guitars and harmonicas. And he didn't want it to be 80s synth. It could be none of those three things, but it had to be all three of those same things at the same time. It had to, so it was
like a form of impressionism.
It's exactly.
You see, it's narrative impressionism where you're taking an idea of a thing, but it's not actually the thing itself.
Exactly.
The combination of those elements makes a new thing. That's
the idea. Exactly.
That's amazing.
But with soul, you're doing both because you can't throw up a random piece of music over a random scene because the music is the scene. They are like the music he's literally has to play. And those, I guess, imagining those are your hands that are being animated.
Oh yeah. There was 80 GoPro cameras surrounding me.
Whoa. Did you put them on your, like, were they attached to your arms or your fingers at all? Or just, how'd that work?
They were attached to the pianos, beneath, above, behind.
Wow, those are some bright lights.
Yeah.
How do you play? How do you like get into talking about get in the zone? How do you do that with like how do you shut that out?
I started on TV when I was in my 20s, mid 20s. So it was just out of college. I've been on the road touring, doing a lot of stuff, and then TV was like, oh, we have to hit our marks, worry about playing this, but not with the lyrics because of the sponsors. Then I have to come right back in and I'm a part of a comedy bit, or I have to change my mindset because I'm playing with a guest band or I'm arranging this piece and I have to also speak to people who are producers in in-ear monitors.
Wow. Yeah. It's a lot of hats.
That aspect of performing, pretty early in my development, not 33, just to kind of have that help me in this situation weirdly, because now I'm in the studio and the cameras are almost not a thing.
Sure, yeah.
I remember from the beginning, they were really a thing. It was like, what is this? This is really tough to kind of
find. How do you get in? How do you find it and all that? It's impressive. So with Minari, it was such a small story in the sense that it was just 5 characters in a mobile home most of the film. So where the music was going to live and when it was going to be big and sweeping was always a question. And like, you really don't want to, it was important for us that we didn't overplay our hand there, you know, cause it's like, right. We recorded an orchestra for Minari, but we really only used it in 3 or 4 spots, really, when we used like 40 strings or something. Most of it was just the piano and my voice and a few other elements.
Right.
But then you want to use the big orchestra. You want to use that sparingly because for this film, I mean, every film is different, you know, that's the beauty of it.
Right way, man. There's no right way. You know, the late great Duke Ellington loved to write music in hotel lobbies and bar rooms when they were on the way to, you know, the closing time and when they were cleaning up, because
it's amazing.
Wanted atmospheric sounds in the background and wanted people to be there to kind of play off, you know, even if you're not listening, consciously hearing it, you could be playing something and he sees they perk up when I do this or that. It's amazing just thinking of the different approaches. You just got me to thinking about that. There's no right way. Creativity is about whatever is inevitable.
Yeah, it reminds me of that thing though, that I think it was a George Harrison thing where, like, you know, he went to study with Ravi Shankar and he was getting into this Eastern music. And then through studying with him, Ravi Shankar told him that essentially the most Eastern way to think about it, or the most pure way to think about it, was to actually go back to rock and roll for him, because that was his roots and that was his soul. That was one of his five. That was his 5 things, you know?
Right. Yes. I love that era of George Harrison. And even going through, I think someone like Picasso or Miles Davis, who are just people who continue to reinvent themselves. Yeah. You see, as you said, the essence of it, what's at the center of it is always the same.
Yeah, it's a constant.
The creativity comes in, how do I take what I have and how does it evolve over time? How does it connect with the world around me in different ways? How does it connect with other musicians, other people?
Yeah.
And how does that blossom?
How do you let that into your work? How do you let that, how do you absorb that and then have it kind of come through like as your output in a way that still feels like you? Yeah. You know, I think that's what's tricky about this year too, us being not experiencing in the same way, us being in isolation. How do you write when your experiences are, when you're connecting out in the world in a you're not in that experiencing that. So where does it come from? I mean, you can find it in virtual ways. You know, like even in this conversation right now, I found this Matisse thing and all these other things, and we're sharing these stories and these things. You can get it virtually, but there's, you know, and it's a kind of a learning process, but yeah, I do miss the, like, going out, seeing live music, playing with other musicians more regularly, having your world sort of expand that way is something that I'm looking forward to, you know, in the future. We
got a link after this, man. It'd be great. I think we could do some amazing stuff.
I'm all for it, man. I would love that, man.
I don't know what, but I could feel it. You know,
that's the beauty of it. If we knew what, it wouldn't be as fun, right? You know? That's half the fun is finding out what that would be. You know, I think that's the exciting part of it. It's like, and with film or collaborating with other artists in general, it's like you didn't know when you got this job with Soul what Joe's music was going to sound like. No. You didn't know how that was going to interact and dance with Jamie's thing and with Trent and Atticus's thing. Like, you didn't know how it was all going to come together. Like, you know, and if you did, it wouldn't be as fun. You wouldn't, you know, like, how could you, you know, you have to find it.
It's not even about, I don't ever want to know.
Yeah.
I think the fun is in being lost and realizing that there's no right way to find yourself. But when you find it, it's like what Herbie was saying. Man, Herbie, who he worked on this project. He was a consultant.
Oh wow. I didn't know that.
With Herbie. Yeah, Herbie is one of the things he said early on when we were talking is he was talking about actually playing with Miles Davis, and he played like a chord, and it had a note in it, and it wasn't the note that was actually in the chord. The chord, it was like, oh, it was another, and it was right in the middle of Miles' solo.
Oh, wow.
And Miles was playing, and at some point Miles stopped, heard the chord. He had his eyes closed the entire time, Herbie says, and then he puts the horn back to his mouth and starts playing off of the note that Herbie played by mistake.
Yeah. He's found it. It became...
And it became, he kept playing it. And
it's amazing.
The right note. And he was like, man, that really changed my whole musical concept from that point on.
Yeah, you see, that changed Herbie's musical concept from that.
Yeah, to think that there are no...
No, absolutely.
Lost together.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Wow, that's cool. That's an amazing story. That he found the one that wasn't right, and that was the one that he was drawn to. It's like, I mean, you can apply that to your life and just find the thing that hit you in a way that you didn't see coming, and don't shy from it. Like, lean in and go for,
Yes. Yeah, go for it. I think I know I'd be honored to hang out in person and make something. Be awesome.
Yeah, man. I'd love that, man. I look forward to it. It's been so great talking to you, man. I look forward to getting together and making something and celebrating this moment face to face. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Let's get it.
Let's do it, man.